By tradition, national politicians do not run for vice presidential nominations. Instead, they try to attract an invitation to join a presidential nominee's ticket, always aware that their fate ultimately is not in their hands. In 1956, the year Jack Kennedy became a national political presence, he followed that tradition, though he walked right up to the edge of violating it. Barely behind the scenes, he courted the attention he had begun to receive. He labored to become the dominant figure in his home state. He confronted obstacles that might augur against his selection by Stevenson, and he pushed back against arguments from his father that he was seeking fool's gold on a ticket doomed to defeat by President Eisenhower. Kennedy was flattered by the growing interest, but also diffident, displaying elements of his trademark dispassion when analyzing himself. Contrary to myth, he wasn't privately pining for the presidency from the moment he returned from his celebrated service in World War II, having just lost his older brother, the more natural politician, in a dangerous combat mission over the English Channel. Nor was he simply an agent of the wishes of his father. Joseph Kennedy meddled, kibitzed, and provided money, especially at the beginning of his son's career. But the old man was also knee-jerk opinionated, overbearing, and imperious. Jack and his siblings loved their father, but they were inclined to take or leave his advice as they saw fit. The force behind Kennedy's ambition was Kennedy himself. Sometimes you read that he was a reluctant figure being dragooned into politics by his father. I didn't get that impression at all. I gathered that it was a wholesome, full-blown wish on his part, recalled Charles Bartlett, a close friend and contemporary who became a syndicated newspaper columnist. Bartlett first met Kennedy in the Patio, a popular Palm Beach nightclub just after the war ended, a time when Kennedy was moving away from a fledgling writing career to try politics. Bartlett, who later introduced Kennedy to Jacqueline Bouvier, knew him and his instincts very well. From the outset of Kennedy's first congressional campaign in 1946, there is other testimony that he, not his father, determined his political future. According to James G. Colbert, a veteran political reporter for the old Boston Post, who knew the father long before he met the son, it was a mistaken impression that Joe Kennedy, or Jack's locally famous grandfather, John Honey Fitzgerald, a former mayor of Boston, were able to run either Jack's public or private life. I want to tell you the one who ran it was John F. Kennedy. He made the decisions. He listened to the ideas of his father, and I think probably to a lesser extent to his grandfather, and the advice that I know about his getting, he disregarded. He made his own decisions, which, as I say, were frequently contrary to what older people thought he should do. Andrew Dassey, a circulation manager for the Boston Globe who was extremely close to Joe Kennedy and aided him as well as his son during a period of primitive press ethics, had this observation. It's often been said that his father swayed him. I never believed he could sway him. His father, with all due respect to him, was a politician of the old school. We were now coming into a new era. We had to do different things. I used to see him, Jack Kennedy, stand right up to him. He really let him have it, and I admired him for it because I think it showed he had courage of his own. Long before there was a Ted Sorensen on the staff or a loyal Irish mafia composed of men named O'Brien, O'Donnell, Powers, Donahue, and others, Kennedy had assistance from some of his father's retainers, but he quickly established his own independence. To the extent Kennedy had a campaign manager for his first congressional campaign in 1946, it was a young man from an advertising and public relations firm that Joe Kennedy used, the Dowd Agency. Mark Dalton worked with Jack Kennedy on politics, as well as writing on major issues over the next 6 years, in a role that anticipated Sorensen's. Dalton was crudely elbowed aside at the beginning of Kennedy's 1952 campaign for the Senate, but he left with strong memories of his association.